So, George, what do you think about The Archivist? Do you have a rating?
I think mine's bigger. 10 out of 10.
Oh man, I would love a 6-7. 6-7.
6, 7, 7.
Yes.
The Archivist is a science fiction / romance novel written by Ti Mikkel and released on October 14, 2025. Do I think this book is a 10 out of 10? Well, my name is The Advocate, and today I'm an advocate for answering just that. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy. So for those of you who don't know, Ti Mikkel is actually one of George R.R. Martin's writing assistants and a writer for the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms TV show and the House of the Dragon TV show, including being head writer for Season 2, Episode 5 of House of the Dragon, that one titled The Regent. However, it now seems that Ti has decided to add book writing to her CV because The Archivist is Ti Mikkel's debut novel. The Archivist, an intended first book in a planned trilogy, is a science fiction genre blend novel that follows a 22-year-old waitress named Cora Moreau, who discovers that she has a rare blood type known as Rh null. And after her doctors make this discovery about her, a group of scientists from a hidden lab in Sarria, Spain, inform Cora that her unique blood type makes her a prime candidate for their secret time-traveling experiments. Not seeing much of a future in waitressing, Cora agrees to leave her home in Colorado and is whisked away to this research facility in Spain, accompanied by her new bodyguard Nick, where there she begins training alongside other research participants who also have that same Rh null blood type as they all prepare their bodies for the physical toll of time travel. However, it soon becomes clear that there are other parties at work nearby who may have ulterior motives for Cora's abilities and may seek to use her for their own gain. Which on paper sounds intriguing, but as we'll get to later on in this review, is not quite as compelling in execution as it could have been. And that's The Archivist in a nutshell. Now, seeing as how this is a first-time book from a debut author being published through a small independent press, I don't want to dog on this author too much. Writing and finishing a 338-page novel is no small task. And the fact that Ti Mikkel pushed through the tiring process all the way from draft to publication is an achievement in and of itself, and for that, Ti should be proud. That said, I don't think this book is a 10 out of 10, and in fact, I think that, with the exception of a few intriguing ideas, there's quite a bit here that holds this book back from being anything more than just a cheesy, cliched story. Let's address the elephant in the room first. Despite being marketed as a genre-blending story, The Archivist leans much more heavily into romance than it does into science fiction. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're picking up this book in hopes of something more evenly balanced, or perhaps you're actually just more interested in the sci-fi side of the story without necessarily caring too much about the romance, you're probably going to be disappointed. This is a romance novel that just happens to have a few science fiction ideas. Which is kind of a shame because the science fiction concepts that do pop up, like the mechanics of how the time machine works or the physical training that the Rh null blood type participants must endure to use it, are, to me, far more intriguing than anything else in this book. And anything else that includes a romance, which, in my opinion, is fairly underwhelming. Now, I'll admit, I'm not someone who particularly seeks out romance in my stories. But even setting my own preferences aside, this book's central relationship, without delving too deeply into spoilers, feels quite forced and riddled with cliches. It's also predictable. Again, keeping things relatively spoiler-free here, but within the first 20 pages of this book, it's already pretty obvious that our main girl Cora here and her bodyguard Nick will eventually catch feelings for each other. How do I know this? Because every single time Nick is on page, Ti Mikkel makes sure to remind the reader of just how hot and muscular he is. And look, if this were a book aimed at a teenage audience following teenage characters, that kind of attraction from Cora would be fine. But this is an adult fiction novel with a young adult perspective. I would think that by this point, the intended readership demographic for this book would be beyond finding stories about crushes based purely on looks to be all that interesting. I mean, yes, in the real world, physical attraction is usually what draws a potential romantic partner in at first. But when it's the only thing that these two characters have going on for them, I genuinely start to question whether or not this is even a real romance. Because outside of Nick's hotness, there's really not much here to justify this romantic connection. I mean, sure, Cora and Nick spend plenty of time together, but their interactions are often so stilted and surface level that there's never really any genuine spark or emotional depth between them. You should be more careful. His face was so serious that Cora couldn't hold back her sarcasm. The next time I'm putting a hot dog on the end of a sharp metal stick, she said, I'll be sure to exercise a higher degree of caution. Nick's face was distorted by the heat from the fire, and Cora wondered if she had been too harsh. Instead of challenging her, though, all he said was, good. Their whole relationship feels forced and like something T included just for the sake of having a romance. Now, on the topic of the author telling me about this book's romance, T, in general, does quite a bit more telling throughout most of this novel than she does showing. Now, I want to be careful here because while I personally have a preference towards show don't tell in the books I read, I know it's not a hard and fast rule. There are plenty of fantastic stories out there that rely more heavily on telling than showing, and they still manage to be great. That said, I personally think telling works best when conveying facts or summarizing events, whereas showing is much stronger when it comes to expressing how a character feels, as it allows the reader to experience those emotions alongside the characters. And my gosh, T sure loves to tell me how her characters feel a lot more than she shows it. Now, this isn't true all the time. Again, I'm trying to stay relatively spoiler-free here. But when it comes to this book's relationships, both romantic and otherwise, T will often tell the reader things like, oh, those two don't like each other, or they have feelings for one another, or they are totally official, instead of letting her prose communicate those dynamics naturally to the reader. And look, I know this is all subjective, but when an author tells me how I'm supposed to feel or what I'm supposed to think about a certain situation, that kind of simplification in the prose does take away a layer of interactivity between the reader and the story, as it gives us fewer chances to pick up on subtext or piece things together ourselves. T here instead elects to spell out directly what her characters are thinking or feeling, and as a result, this book often jumps straight to emotional conclusions that, in my opinion, don't always feel earned. That said, I do want to give credit where credit is due. Despite this book's romance often feeling heavy-handed, there is one area where T's romance here genuinely shines. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's with regards to how she writes a physical lovemaking scene. Now, do I personally think these scenes are built on unearned emotional buildup? Yes. Do I also think these scenes are unbearably cheesy and kind of make me want to vomit? Also yes. But I can't deny that, even as someone who is not a romantic reader, T handles these scenes with a surprising amount of confidence and flow. I'm not going to put quotes up here, partly to avoid spoilers and partly because I don't want to vomit again, but trust me, T's sex scenes are leagues better than her mentor George R.R. Martin's, as his sex scenes often devolve into a barrage of unintentionally comical and cringy adjectives. Now, while I do think T, for the most part, sidesteps the same cringe-inducing habits that plague George's sex scenes, one area where I do think she does stumble in is with regards to her characters. Whether it's Nick or Cora's RH Null blood type participant buddies, virtually everyone outside of our main girl Cora here feels relatively flat and one-dimensional. I mean, you've got Cora's gay best friend here who is stereotypically gay in every stereotypical way. You've got Cora's German coworker who loves techno music because of course he does, he's German. And then you've got Cora's big, brooding, boring, manly man of a man in Nick who mans around because, well, he's a man. Those characters often feel like cardboard archetypes more so than they do real people. Now, flat characters aren't necessarily a deal breaker. If the narrative is strong enough to carry a story, most readers will overlook that story's weaker elements. However, Ti here barely spends enough time on the story proper, as she instead elects to devote around 80% of this book on the flat one-note characters and their relationships. The remaining 20% that actually advances the plot, the time travel shenanigans that are supposed to be the whole reason these characters are in Spain, and what is easily the most interesting part of the story, ends up having to carry the weight of the flatter 80%. And it just doesn't quite work. No matter how many times Cora tries to convince me that I should also be investing as much interest in these other characters as she does because they're her true friends. But despite me ragging on this story's cheesy unearned romance or the archetypal characters, I do think there's potential here for where this series could go. Even though I'm not a fan with how little time Ti devotes to the more interesting science fiction elements of the story, there's still something genuinely captivating about the lab sequences here. The RH-null blood types being trained to overcome G-Lock, the explanations of their unique blood type, and the backstory of how the time travel program even began, all that is very interesting, and it all leads me to the conclusion that Ti has created a very intriguing concept here. And if she can work to better balance out the science fiction elements with the more romantic elements of the story, which she's so eager to tell, then I think we could be in for a potentially intriguing trilogy. But what say you? What did you think of everything I said about this book? Have you personally read The Archivist and agree or disagree with my assessment? Comment below and let me know. Thank you so much for watching this video, ladies and gentlemen. My name is The Advocate and I read books. Let me know if there's other stories you'd like me to delve into for future book review videos. Until next time, The Advocate, out.